Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and we're at the beginning of a new year. But Mike and Mike, here's my question for you. What if I had a bad year in 2016? How do you put a bad year behind you?
Great question, Jody. First thing that I would hope is that you knew it was going to be a bad year before the end of the year wrapped up and you've already started putting it behind you. So my first thing there would be start early. So if I know that the year is not coming together the way that it needs to, I want to make sure that I'm building out pipeline for the following year. I'm pushing that reset button early. That reset button might happen in late October or early November. That Thanksgiving week usually is a good week for sales professionals to reflect on the year and look at what's behind them as well as what's in front of them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because if you let the calendar define your success every year and you wait until the end of the year and you go, okay, that was a bad year, I'm just going to take it off, check the box and get it out of my mind or whatever. And you haven't started thinking about what is 2017 going to look like. And if you haven't started planning that before the year starts, now you're playing catch up. And so it is really important. Really, what we do is a continuous cycle. The things that change on December 31st for a lot of us are things like our comp plan. It might be our territory assignments. It's the things that get reset. But the reality is we're always trying to build a pipeline, which includes new opportunities. We're always looking for new opportunities. We're always looking to move things forward. So really not be defined by the calendar in itself, but always looking 3 or 4 steps ahead to be ready for that turnaround.
Yeah. So let's say that we're at the beginning of the year. Last year was a bad year. We didn't do that planning in the Thanksgiving week. And you say, I've got my new comp plan. I know what my territory is. How am I going to attack it this year? Now, for me, this is about getting back to basics. And we talked a little bit about this in previous discussion around slumps and ruts. This is at that beginning part of the year hitting the reset button. So one of the things I look at is what are the things that I need to accomplish here in the short term? So, have I identified the roles of the people that I'm targeting within the organizations that I'm targeting? Have I identified some of the background information that I need to know about the organization? If I have a strategic account plan template that I use, have I started at least labeling that with each of the target accounts that I'm going after? That might be some of the short-term stuff that I can control directly. It's not driven by meetings that I have to have with others. These are some of the research things that I can do. Then the other thing I look at is what are some of the longer-term things that I can do? This period, 3, 4, 5, 6 months out. What am I looking at in the first 180 days of the year? And this is where I start to say, by that point in time, I need to have X, Y, or Z in place. X, Y, or Z might be a certain number of meetings with an organization, a certain number of pilots or proof of concepts in place, a certain number of whatever other measurables you have in the product that you're selling. Mike and I have talked a lot in the past about things like buyer's journey and how people are purchasing. Apply what you know about the people you're working with and incorporate that into your long-term plan as well.
Is it helpful to look back on the year and figure out why it was a bad year? Or are you better off just looking forward?
Well, I think if you don't want to repeat the, what's his theory about insanity, right? Doing the same things over and over and expecting a different outcome. That's exactly one of the first things I do is take an inventory of what worked, what didn't work. What are the things that we set out to do during the year? And then it's almost like a big postmortem for the year to say, where was our thinking valid and what assumptions did we make where we learned throughout the year, we filled in the gaps and we recognized that assumption we had at the beginning of the year didn't pan out or it wasn't a good part of our strategy. So absolutely taking an inventory of the things that worked, the things that didn't work, the things that maybe you want to try going forward. You definitely don't want to repeat mistakes. And part of that is really taking an honest look at the year. And a lot of times too, I think I look at it from 2 perspectives. One, I look at the system around me and the system that I'm part of, and I want to understand how that's either supporting my success or are there things that I can help other people to work on so that as a team, we're approaching things maybe in a better way. But I also really take an honest look at myself personally. And if you have a good relationship with the people that you work with or the person that you work for, and this is outside of a lot of people get subjected to the annual review process, which becomes a really painful process. And we should probably make a note of this. We should talk about this at some point. But the idea of sitting down with your manager, the person that is your sales mentor, and really doing an honest evaluation of your own skill sets. What are the gaps that you have? Where did deals go wrong or go sideways? And what's the personal skill inventory that I can work on so that I can sort of better my chances for the upcoming year? So it's definitely important to look back.
Absolutely. You've got to look back. You've got to ask yourself, you be honest with yourself. Take that, Mike talked about postmortems, and there's some great documentation out there around how to do these effectively with teams. But you can apply the same concept to yourself as an individual. And this is whether you're talking about a bad sales year or you're just talking about whether or not you accomplished your own personal goals for the year. Looking back and saying, did I do what I said I was going to do? How did I evolve or adapt my plan over the year based on new information? What things happened that were beyond my control? And how do I plan for those things going forward? It's always important to reflect on the past so that you don't make those same mistakes over.
And if you do that, and do it collaboratively too with other people that sort of were part of that journey for that year. And what I like about it is once you get through this, let's say we're going to call it a sales year, and we're in December, and the thing that you can do is start to look at data. You can start to look at things probably more objectively because you're not in the sort of the heat of the moment of sales. I mean, we're just so busy all the time, and all year long, you're constantly chasing after new things and trying to generate new opportunity. And the idea is, what does the data tell you at the end of the year? And you can actually sit back and start doing some reports, start looking at where you spent your time, where you're having success, and let the data tell a little bit of the story as well. And I think just stepping back from the hectic pace of everything that you have going on and really reflecting and analyzing data will give you a much clearer picture of where you can make improvements for the upcoming year.
And Mike highlighted this when he said success. I mean, the other thing you do is as you have that collaborative discussion with others and you engage with those, look at what the people on your team who are successful over the past year, look at them. What did they do? Did they do things differently than you did? Did they find out something new about a customer? Is there some new idea, new trend, new concept? Really look at what's working in the marketplace and see how you can apply that within your customer base. The other beauty about data is data allows you to detach emotionally. It takes that emotion out of the equation where these numbers, the numbers are the numbers. It's the old football quote when looking at a football idea, when looking at video, the eye in the sky doesn't lie. If it's on tape, it happened. So trust the information that you're looking at, look for trends, and adapt your process based on what you see.
Does it change anything if the company had a great year, but I personally had a bad year?
Yeah, I think
that could be really frustrating.
It could be frustrating. And I said, yeah, but then I kind of think, I don't know that it does. I mean, there's
I have an example years ago. I remember I had a team that was introduced into the organization. It was an established sales organization. My team was added to that existing organization, and they were actually coming off a record year. And it was one of those sales kickoff meetings where everybody was in the President's Club. They were all high-fiving each other. And we were 4 months into our launch, and we basically we couldn't sell our way out of a paper bag yet. And so when the CEO was highlighting the financial performance of the year, my team was like, oh yeah, those guys that are just getting up and running. Thank goodness the other team brought it home and they're awesome. And I can tell you that I had it was a small team. It was a half a dozen people just kind of sank in their chairs during that whole conference thinking, wow, that really sucks that we're kind of the drain on the success here. And this other team did really, really well. But I'll tell you, the other thing it did is it motivated us to say next year, we want to be the team that everybody's celebrating at next year's meeting. So it's one of those things where we've probably said this before, but good times are never that great and bad times are never that bad. And it's the same thing with numbers. Sales numbers come and go. And you can have a fantastic year or a fantastic quarter or a fantastic month, but you're also going to have bad months. And the reality is, over time, if you're doing the right things, you want to see more consistency. And I would actually, this will flip this around a little bit, but I just got to thinking about that painful sales kickoff meeting and what that felt like. But you also have to be careful when you have a really, really good year and you're coming off a banner year. And what are the things you need to do to make sure that the upcoming year doesn't become the down year on the tail of, hey, we just had our record year? Because I've seen, it's kind of like a trap football game where you go into it, you shouldn't take it for granted. You shouldn't overlook the other team. But coming off a really good sales year can also be a pitfall that you really have to be careful about.
Well, look at the Cardinals this year, right? I mean, the Cardinals came in, everybody was expecting them. They were going to win the Super Bowl. And on paper, they were going to win the Super Bowl. And what's their record now? I know this will be afterwards.
You're not dating the podcast because the Cardinals suck every year. So it could probably work.
It could be worse. It could be the Jets.
As a conflicted 49er and Green Bay fan, I really can't give you too much grief either. But anyhow.
But so you look at that and success breeds success. And you can learn in the example that Mike gave, there's a lot that everybody could learn from where that success came from. And in that instance, the success that the team had and the organization had was probably attributed to a couple of very large deals that came in that could have gone one way or another. And if those went the other way, then the entire organization would have had a bad year. When you're dealing with the volume that the team that he was talking about was dealing with on a day in, day out basis, they don't have those same kind of swings that these large deals can carry over. So I think you've got to also you've got to be realistic about where you are inside the organization and what your focus is. And am I in a role where transaction volume, it drives success or is something that impacts success? And how can I increase the number of transactions? How can I increase or speed up my process so that I'm more efficient working with those customers? Versus another role where I'm working on 5 deals in any given year. And I know if I get 2 of those deals done, it's going to be a good year. I'll hit my number. I'll exceed it. If I get 3, it's an awesome year. If I get 1, I live to fight another day. That's a different model than this high transaction model. So I think you've also got to look at it and say, what kind of role am I in? And where do I want to go as I go forward? How do I want, maybe in this next year, what are some of the things that I should be looking at to help me evolve into that next role, that next progression, that next thing that I should be doing? So, Jody, good point. I think it's important to look at the past. And if you're in an organization where the organization's successful and you're not, see what you can learn from that. And to Mike's point, if you're in an organization, the organization's not successful, but you've had a really good year, don't get too high. Continue to go back to the basics, the foundational things that helped you get there so that you don't risk falling off. Most of us in strategic sales environment, the ones who are really successful in this role have really good years and then have a couple of off years. And you might have 2 really good years in a row and then an off year. You're going to go through those cycles. So planning for that is also an important thing to consider as you kick off your year.
What impact does goal setting have on whether or not you have a good year?
Well, you got to have goals. I think it's hard to for me, I've had a hard time moving things forward if I didn't have some kind of vision or some kind of idea about where I wanted to go, some kind of goal, whether that goal is to reduce the amount of money that we're spending on a monthly basis from a family budget perspective, or the goal is to add more money into our savings account, or the goal is to have X number of deals that are out there. Goal setting is important. And I also I think it's important to set those both from a short-term perspective. So things that you can do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, and then the longer terms on an annual basis on 2 to 3 year period, so that you're working toward a given direction, but you're able to also check some things off the list to demonstrate progress.
Yeah, because if you don't have goals, you don't have anything to measure your success and whether or not if you're growing or if you're moving ahead or if you're just kind of flailing around or maybe even at a decline and not even realize it because you're not measuring how you're doing against those overarching goals. And so it is important. And those can be, like Mike was saying, those can be daily activity goals. They can be time allocation goals, time management goals, because the funny thing about sales, I think the one thing that has worked for me for years and years is if I can distill it down to what the incremental things that I can move forward every day, if I make every day count, what I find is at the end of the year, all of that adds up to a pretty meaningful year. And the problem is if you have the highs and lows and you're enjoying the highs, and then you're kind of disoriented during the lows, it's time sneaks up on you in a funny way where now you're trying to make up time, or you're trying to figure out, oh gosh, I'm at 42% of quota and there's 60 days left in the year, and my typical sales cycle is 75 days. You're screwed. So the idea is break it down into these things, because every day that you have as a sales professional is a day that you're investing, and make sure that every day you're doing something, even though if it's not closing sales or whatever, but don't lose those days, because they do catch up with you rather predictably.
Yeah. Do the right things and good things, or do the right things and good things will follow. Another way to look at that is trust your process. Go through, you've got to be honest with yourself about, what am I doing on a daily basis that's moving the ball forward, whether it's related to an individual deal, it's related to my overall territory, it's related to my sales career, it's related to how I'm leading my team, it's related to how I'm communicating inside the organization. Keep moving forward rather than getting into that trap of, oh, I'll get to that tomorrow. Or I think one of the biggest challenges that people run into this time of year is reacting to all of the inquiries that come in from customers as they get back from the holiday period. I mean, there are a lot of people who are off for a 2-week period. They come back at the beginning of January. Their hair is on fire related to initiatives that they're focused on for the year. And you could find yourself spending weeks catching up on those activities. Then you've lost those weeks on moving the things that you need to do for your own individual role as you go forward. And this is where you start to get into making sure you've got a solid time management practice or practice and process that you're executing against.
Mike Connor mentioned that you need to take inventory if you had a bad year and figure out what might have caused it. Was it something you did? Is it a weakness you have? You two personally, if you find that something you did or something you didn't do, a weakness you have, led to you having a bad year, how do you approach that? How do you start to make that not be a factor for the upcoming year?
One of the ideas Mike had that I've also used this is looking at the people that aren't having that same problem that I'm having, or the same struggle, or somebody that seems to have a talent in an area where I have a gap. And I seek the guidance and the help from people that I work with and the people that I network with. And I, rather than try and figure it out on my own and try and reinvent the wheel, I look for people that have those strengths and I see what I can learn from them. And I think that's something that I do very consciously, because if somebody's figured it out, it's like anything else in sales. If you've got a roadmap and you've got a formula that works, there's no sense in reinventing it. So that's really what I do. I look for people that are successful in whatever the gap is that I need. And then there's so many training tools that you can use too. I mean, we use a couple of different learning tools. We've got our online library we use with Blue Bottle Biz. We've got even YouTube videos, or there's a lot of sales related content out there that we can look up. And if it's an area outside of sales, if it's one of the things that's been interesting for us going into starting Catalyst Sale and wearing all the different hats that we've been wearing. Mike is our newly minted HubSpot expert. Mike didn't ever run a HubSpot platform before, and here he is learning it. So then we would rely on those experts in HubSpot or HubSpot themselves. What training content do they offer? And so many of the products that we use in the subscriptions that we have, they all have learning assets baked into them, and it's just really leveraging those.
Aspiring HubSpot expert, but thank you.
Well, today's only the 8th of December, so you've got until the 1st of January.
It's coming up. So The other thing that I like to do is I really trust the people around me. So, Mike and I've got I'm fortunate to work with Mike, and I can be very direct with him, and he knows that I'll be direct, but it's direct with him about the things I'm working on and ask him for feedback to help keep me guided or keep me in line. So when we have a difficult conversation or a constructive conversation or a whatever with either a member of our team or one of our clients, taking the time to reflect after that conversation and ask, am I doing the things that I said I wanted to do? Am I being a little bit more patient in some of those conversations? Am I toning down the D aspect of my personality? Of my disc personality. And, so my point there is make sure you have those trusted advisors that you can count on, those associates that you can work with, where you can have them join a call with you. I mean, you can introduce, it's the number of times that I've been introduced on a call as anything from the partner manager to the customer service expert to the person who does our data stuff to the chief revenue officer. There are different ways that you can be introduced or brought into these calls, or even brought in as a silent participant to listen in and provide and have someone give you direct, candid feedback that maybe your customer's not going to give you directly, but someone you can trust inside the organization will.
Well, this has been great. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts you want to throw out about recovering from a bad year?
Well, I think it's appropriate because I know if you follow the media, if you followed the election, if you followed, a lot of things that have happened in 2016, the people that I talked to, this has been a tough one. We went through a really weird, and obviously this is focused for our friends here in the US, but we went through a hell of an election. It's been just a nasty year for a lot of people. And that's not to say everybody had a bad year, but we know that there's a lot of people out there that just want to put 2016 behind us for a lot of different reasons. And, that's one of the things I'm looking forward to. As much as the downside to me on January 1st is you look at your dashboard and you see the revenue you've generated for the entire year. And then the funny thing is January 1st, that thing goes down to zero. And it's like, whoa, here we go again. We're going to start all over and make it happen. But at the same time, you can just kind of somehow just check the rest of it out and put it behind you. And hopefully that's what we'll do, not just as sales professionals, but just as people, human beings in general. Learn from what we did in 2016 and take the good parts and the stuff we just need to put behind us. Let's put it behind us.
Well, and know that there is nothing you can do to change what's happened in the past. The past is behind you. It's that scene in The Lion King where the baboon smacks the lion in the head with a cane. You can't do anything about that thing that happened 10 minutes ago, other than if you hurt somebody's feelings, go back and say, I'm sorry, correct it. Be honest with yourself about the relationships that you're building, but know that the past is the past. It's what you decide to do from this point forward that'll help you move forward. So be honest with yourself about what your goals and your objectives are. If you don't have goals, you don't have objectives, try to figure some of those out. If you have a hard time figuring them out, talk to somebody who can help you. Lean on your sales leadership, lean on mentors, connect with us. We're happy to talk with people about the things not to turn this into a therapy session, but we're happy to talk with people about the things they're trying to accomplish in their careers. And if we can help you on the sales side or the sales leadership side, or getting things going with your startup, we're happy to have that discussion.
Well, thank you, Mike and Mike. And let me tell you this, Mike and Mike love answering your questions. We've had some listener questions we've brought onto the show. Sometimes Mike and Mike will just answer them without the question being used on the show. But if you have any sales related questions, or like this episode is about goals, recovering from a bad year, it doesn't have to be directly sales related, but we would love to hear it. You can just send an email to hello@catalystsale.com. So thank you again, Mike and Mike, and thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.